Hello, Runnels Christian Church and friends. I am Pastor Katie Russell Hainline, and this is a meditation for June 21st, 2020. I want to give you a quick heads up that there will not be a recorded meditation for next week, June 28th, because that's the date of our annual meeting in worship, and there will not be a sermon. However, I encourage you to check this page to see a short video celebrating the year of ministry that we've just shared together. The scripture reading today is the story of the loaves and fishes once again, this time from John chapter 6 verses 1 through 14, and I'll actually be reading from the King James Version today. After these things, Jesus went over to the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread, that these may eat? And this he said to prove to him, for he knew himself what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in this place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were seated down, and likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth that the prophet that should come into the world. This is the final week we'll read the story of the loaves and fishes together. And John, as is pretty typical for John, tells the story very differently from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There are many details in this gospel version that the others don't tell in the story. The conversation Jesus has with his disciples is different. The fact that the 5 loaves and 2 fish come from a little boy is different. But I want to think about just one word that is different in John's telling. Filled. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say that the crowds eat until they are satisfied. But in the King James Version, which we read from today, John says they eat until they are filled. And there is a difference between being satisfied and being full. When my stomach starts to growl before lunchtime, I can eat a granola bar or a few almonds and be satisfied, but I'm certainly not full. Satisfaction means eating a sensible meal. Filled means eating Thanksgiving dinner. And I go back and forth on which is the better word. We can be filled with the wrong kind of things, or too much fullness can be unhealthy. For instance, I have quite a sweet tooth, and I'd love to get full on giant bowls of chocolate ice cream every day. But often I'll try to simply satisfy my craving for something sweet by eating a small piece of chocolate instead. Satisfied is sometimes the better choice. But when we're talking about stewardship, as we have been in the last few weeks, I like that John uses the word filled, because his version of this story says that when we give our gifts to God, God doesn't just satisfy, God fills. Even if we don't think our gifts are big enough or grand enough to really matter. We hear that same doubt expressed in John's gospel story today. The disciples ask, What are 5 loaves and 2 fish among so many? How does what we have to offer make a difference to this crowd? It doesn't matter. But Jesus takes the gifts that are offered. He gives thanks for them. He blesses them. And in his hands, those gifts become things that fill. Next week at RCC, we will vote on the budget that will fund the church's ministry in the year 2020-2021. For weeks now, I've been asking our members and friends to pray about how they might take part in providing for that ministry. Today, the last day that we read this story together, I encourage you to think about the ways your gifts to RCC, when put into the hands of God, fill. When our congregation set a record-breaking year at the Christmas outreach auction last December, I saw RCC fill the pot of money we use to provide emergency assistance to our neighbors and to our community. When our youth come home from a week at church camp and tell me what a great time they had, I see RCC filling the spirits of young people who will grow up to be leaders in this church. When 70 children gather in the sanctuary for Vacation Bible School each summer, I see RCC fill little kids with the stories of God. When I see council members and elders prayerfully do their work, I see RCC filling our call to be faithful disciples to the mission of Jesus and his church. When our neighbors gather around the tables after funerals or for a fish fry or soup supper or harvest supper, I know they leave with their stomachs filled, but I hope they also leave filled with the knowledge that Runnels Christian Church cares for them. This is what your gifts to the church can do. They fill. My family supports the ministry of Runnels Christian Church because we have been filled by this church. I'm proud to serve as your pastor, and we're happy to make RCC our spiritual home. If your life is more full because you have been a part of this community, I hope that you'll join us at the annual meeting next week. Celebrate what we have done together in the last year. Learn about what we believe God is calling us to in the year ahead, and help us fill our ministry and our mission with your gifts. Amen.